Drago,
What is going on?
you were
Kind
frozen
sir.
for a second. I had to switch over to my better internet. Sorry about
Okay.
that. Third Chance, episode number 11. We have the beautiful, the charismatic, the great real estate agent, right, Kimberly?
Yes.
Yes. The lovely Kimberly White and hanging out with us two knuckleheads today. So I am excited to hear your story. Third Chance is all about the chances we've been given in life. I'm a former cocaine addict. I should say still a cocaine addict. I have to wake up every day and be aware that I could always fall back into that hole. So I thank God for that every morning. And to ask him to give me strength to not fall back into that hole. It's one of my daily prayers, part of my morning routine. So we call it the third chance because I've been given three chances on life. And I just found friendship in my friend Jeff Dragovich, and through his story and his addictions, I'll let him share that, and then we'll get into Kimberly's story.
Awesome. Thank you, Chad. Appreciate you guys listening. I wanted to we're trying to raise the stigma of addiction, right? And how it works and what we got going on. And I wanted to just kind of flip it around. We've had a bunch of great guests, former addicts, parents, but I wanted to bring somebody on that's special to me. That I really, really respect, that is a different side of addiction, where she necessarily didn't grow up and become an addict or an alcoholic, but she grew up in a household full of drug addicts, which would be tough for a child. So Kimberly White, I've known Kimberly going on at least 7 years. She came into my life, a really important time in my life where I was like kind of trying to figure out my business, and I'm like, I'm gonna go do my own thing, and I was really scared. And she was the first person to wrap her arms around me and said, come with us, we'll take care of you, we'll make sure it happens. And like, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for her. We've created a great working relationship, and she's super awesome, and I love her lots, and I really appreciate you coming on, Kim. Tell us a little bit about, so you grew up in California, right?
Southern California.
Southern California. Nice.
Yeah.
And
So you got
go ahead.
like about where? So
Yeah.
it's the San Fernando Valley.
San Fernando Valley. And so both your parents were together the whole time? Like, how was your family dynamic growing up?
No, my parents were together longer before I was born than after. So my parents met in 1970, and it was kind of that like fun, free, wild life. And I don't think either of them saw the road ahead. I think they were just having fun, partying. And then in 76, I was born. And by the early 80s, they had split up completely. But the whole time, I don't know about before I was born. I think they dabbled in and out. At some point, they became addicts. My mom is also an alcoholic. And so, anyways, after I was born, while I was, they were pregnant with me, and then after, they were addicts. And then my parents got clean when I was 10 when my mom got clean, and she had to work a program. Whereas my dad got clean when I was 12, and he didn't have to. He cold turkey. He's just has a different approach. But I think, they're always going to be an addict, like you said.
Yeah. I think my parents, we just were the age where our parents came up in that generation, right? Free love, drugs and rock and roll, right?
Yeah.
So totally get it. Like, at what age did you start realizing, like,
I would have been in a lot of trouble if I grew up in Southern California, but I was in the cornfields of Iowa. I would have been in more trouble than I already was.
When did you start realizing, like, oh shit, mom and dad are a little bit different?
Well, my earliest memory is probably about 5 years old. Because at some point, like around 2 years old, my dad and I went to live with my grandmother. So she made it normal for me. And so I didn't really know. My dad was just, you know, he was in his 20s and he was in a motorcycle club and he was off doing his thing. And my mom was off doing her thing. So I had a really, like, at that point, for those couple years, I had a pretty normal life with my grandma and my papa and my aunt. We lived all together. And so for me, it wasn't until my dad and I moved out around 5 years old that I knew. So from then on, you know, it was a hard childhood, but I have a lot of great memories. So I'll say though that one thing about my mom going into recovery is I would visit her every summer and I would do like Alateen, Al-Anon, AA meetings. I would go with her and it taught me about addiction. So it made me where I never was curious. Other than not knowing what it feels like to do any type of drug, I never had a desire because I seen what it did to them. And then I learned about addiction and codependency. And I mean, I was 10, like 10 years old. Again, I don't think a 10-year-old should have to know those things. I don't think a 5-year-old should have to, but you know, that was a part of life. Like I said, I have a lot of great memories too. So.
Of course.
That's so cool that she says that, Drago, because we've been having this struggle on previous episodes. Like Jeff and I both know it's in our DNA to have a little bit of addiction. And it's like, hey, how do we talk? I got 2 8-year-old twins, right? Like now is the time to start talking to them. We've been debating, like, do we educate them? Do we talk to them? Are they too young? But it kind of reinforces what you just said to me, like, hey, it's good to have that education. It's good. Maybe we should start taking our kids to meetings with us, Jeff. What do you think?
We could.
Well, I'll tell you though, why I think it's good. I mean, nobody wants to admit to their children, like, hey, I'm an addict and I made like a whole bunch of mistakes, and nobody wants to say that to your kids, especially if you're in recovery, right? But when you come from addicts or an addict, your chances of becoming an addict or alcoholic is so great, like a million times more. So you know, and these kids are learning a lot of stuff younger nowadays. It's a lot different.
So what was the environment you grew up in? Like what was around? How did it affect your life? Like I know before we got on, you mentioned you sometimes having to take care of your parents. Just talk about that experience. Like what was around, what was the environment, what were the drugs, and how did it impact you in your relationship with your parents?
Well, when they conceived me, they were heroin addicts. I'm sure they dabbled in, I know that at some point they did speed and I'm sure cocaine. Like I know that they've done other things, but their drug of choice was heroin for a pretty good amount of time. And then I know that they've done speed, and I think my mom said she even tried crack, and you know, it just depended on what part of their life, how much money they had, and but they've done everything. So it's not a joke, but it's a joke in my family that I raised my dad, and he'll say that, and we have like, you ask Jeff, like I'm a daddy's girl, like we have the most closest relationship. I'm very close to my mom too, but my mom will tell you like my dad can do no wrong. In my eyes, my sister's eyes, you know, he just has that position in our life. But I did help raise him. I mean, I took care of a lot of things, like, you know, I had to sometimes cook my own meals. Sometimes we didn't have food. There was, I do thank God that in the second grade, we moved back to where I was born in Simi Valley, and I met my best friend that's still my best friend in the 2nd grade. Her family became my family. So I had there was a lot of key players where I got to escape, and that's why I said I have some great memories. But I am the parent to my parents to this day. Like, I have that kind of role.
When did you realize that you had to be that? Do you have like any defining moments, like where you were, hey, I'm kind of the adult here. I need to take care of my parents and I need to steer clear of anything going on in the house to be able to do that?
Well, I can't remember the age that this started, but I had this fear that my dad would die. And so I was always taking care of him. Like, I always had to make sure he was alive, make sure he didn't overdose, because he has overdosed before. And sometimes I couldn't leave the house because I was scared that would happen. So it was very early on. It had to have been probably around that age of 5 when we moved by ourselves.
Whoa, that's crazy. Like, listen, my youngest is 5 years old, right? She can't even remember where she put her Crocs on or put her clothes on. So, like, that's literally blows my mind.
Yeah. I feel the same way about my kids.
Yeah. Where did the fear of like your dad like passing away, did that come because of an overdose, or like you just had an experience where you're like, oh shit, like this is not right and he could die from doing this? Or
I think it was an innate type of thing.
do you just feel it?
I worried. It made me become codependent. And I think in codependency, you're a fixer, let me make sure the situation is all okay. Like, you become that person. But I do distinctly remember probably about 8 to 10 years old, he came out of the bathroom and he was white as a ghost and he was shaking. And so I remember then, like, thinking, you're going to die. Whoa. So I was between 8 and 10 that I remember that like it was yesterday. And so my mom, because she got clean first, she was like, she lived in New Orleans at the time. And she said, you could just live here. My mom was working a program, going to church. She was in a really good place for the first time in my life. And she's like, you could just live here. And I remember telling her, no, if I move here, my dad will die. And she said that was about 10, 11 years old that I told her that.
So what would be, gosh, how do I ask this? What would be some advice that you would give to somebody like us who has kids of that age, and they're struggling with addiction? Like, it might be kind of hard to hear you and like, hey, Kimberly turned out okay. I'm gonna keep doing what I do, right? What would be some advice that you give a parent who's struggling with addiction? And what would you give parents that have beat it, like Jeff and I, advice on of how to educate their kids and to talk to their kids about the addiction and the DNA that we have?
Okay, so I have 2 parts to that. Because my parents, like, I always felt not good enough because my parents, so for people that are still in their addiction and have kids, you have no idea what it does to your children, because it creates this lifelong not good enough. Why wasn't I enough for you to not do drugs? Because you're not, again, this is a disease. You can't always help this. It's not something that,
yeah.
But the reality is it still messes up your kids in some way, shape, or form. Now, as far as parents that are in recovery and they have kids, whether they were a part of your addiction or you had them in recovery, I would say this. I was so honest with my kids, like, don't do drugs. This is what happens. Like, I was so on my kids that I think it was too much because I was so scared. Like, you come from addict, both sides of the family are addicts or alcoholics for my kids. And so I was so like
Interesting.
scared.
More about it, right?
And so I would just pound it, pound it, pound it. So, okay, maybe I went a little overboard. And, but I just wanted them to know, like, if you do it, if you smoke marijuana, it's the gateway drug. Like, I went through this whole thing, and it was it was every chance that something came up. I'm like, look, see what happened. And so I think that there's a fine line and there's a happy medium. Your kids have to go out there and discover and explore and realize what they want, like, as scary as that is, you don't want to push them to the other side either.
Yeah.
I call it the dark side. You don't want to push them over there, but you need to educate them. And I feel like it depends on the maturity of your child.
Yeah.
Like, where are they at 8 years old, 9 years old, 10, 12? But I'm going to tell you, by preteen, they should know. And this isn't about a DARE program, like where they say, just say no to drugs.
Right.
No, this is a real life. Look what mommy did. Look what daddy did. This is what happened. It took me this long to get my life together. And look, I made all this money, but I was secretly killing myself. Like, you just have to be honest.
Yeah. Well,
none of your kids, I got to ask though, none of your kids have got that gene, right? None of them are addicts. I mean, I would know you, I'm sure you would explain, but I just want to ask the question so the audience knows, like, none of your children ended up becoming alcoholics or drug addicts, correct?
I mean, my oldest son, and I can't really say too much on here because of where he's at now. In college, probably had some little exploring.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I just can't talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's where I'm at. It's like, gosh, I talk about this a lot, Kimberly. It's like, do I really expect my kids to not like ever try anything, right? Because I know how I was at that age, and I certainly wasn't listening to my parents. And, God bless your father, because if I would have had children, I was lucky. Do I say lucky? Yeah, it's probably lucky. I was lucky to just be in full party mode and not have any kids during that age, get my act together and clean up before I had kids, right?
Yeah.
So, because if I would have been 24, had a kid, you could have put me in the same class that you talked about your father in, right? And I would have had to have someone raising me, right? So it's just, I think about this all the time with our kids. Like, am I going to be so naive to think that they're never going to try anything? And then I dabble back and forth with, like, okay, there's fentanyl now. So do I have to have a talk with them in high school? Like, hey kids, if you're going to do Molly or ecstasy or cocaine, you need to let dad buy it for you, so I know it's safe. Or, hey, here's a tester if you're going to go down that path, because I don't want you to, take a hit of ecstasy and you're dead the next day. It's like, gosh, that's the dilemma of now of I'm not naive enough to think that my kids aren't going to try something. Like, they're always just going to steer clear. So it's like, what do we do as parents to not be naive and think our children are perfect and they're never going to try and smoke weed or snort a line or do some Molly, right? And but how do we not push them into, hey, you're an addict. I'm enabling this behavior by telling you I'll go get you some Molly. So I've thought through all those situations, and I just don't have a perfect answer. Maybe you do.
I have something on that. Like, I've come to the point now where I can only do my best and educate them the way that I think I could educate them.
Yeah.
Also, too, what I'm finding is because like you, like for example, like the other day I was taking my son, he's 16, he doesn't want to get a license, he wants us to drive him everywhere, so he's going to his buddy's house, and you just have those conversations, I'm like, listen, if you guys are gonna go and have a good time or something happens, like I'm not saying you're gonna do that. He's listening, but he's not really listening because he doesn't want to hear that. So
Yeah.
what I'm finding is working is asking him questions on his opinion. Like, what's your opinion on dad being a drug addict and you guys were young? Do you remember that? And that's actually kind of opened up some dialogue back with my son, my teens, a little bit better than me just like hammering him, right? Like, don't do this, you're gonna die. This is my story. So that seems to be working. But I've also come to the fact that like I cannot stop them. They're gonna experiment. You know what I'm saying?
What are you gonna do? Are you gonna be like, hey, if you're gonna smoke weed, you need to let dad buy it for you? Or hey, if you're gonna take Molly, you need to test it?
Yeah, for sure. So they're out of LA. It's called endoverdose.net. You go on there, you do like a 15-minute test. They're gonna send you 4 things of Narcan. They're gonna send you fentanyl strips. They'll send the strips too. When we had Dave on, that crazy drug we never even heard about, xylazine. They give the xylazine strips, and then I'm just making them aware. They have for kids, for teenagers to be able to take that to see the signs of an overdose and what that looks like. But also to just being upfront with them, like, listen, if you're going to experiment and these drugs are coming off the street, like you're making a decision that where it might be life or death. So I'm open with you. My door is always open. Nobody's going to judge you. I just need to know what's going on, and I could possibly guide you through the path of what needs to be done. So I just feel like at this point, like I'm going to do everything that I have to have have this stuff in my house, right?
Right.
So when that day if that day ever comes, it's there. That's just, and to be fair, it just makes me feel better, if that makes sense. Like I didn't even know about this charity. My wife's like, go talk to.
You're freaking me out about having teenagers right now. I'm not
Dude,
like
I'm in it right now, man. I got 16-year-olds. Ask him how many times I've called her. I'm like, hey, I was thinking about talking about, my daughter about this. And she's like, you got to do it. Just say it like this. Like she's usually my go-to with the kids because I know she's been through that.
That's awesome. What do you think, Kimberly? Is this what we need to go to? Do we need to that's what's so different from when I was using. It's like, you're not gonna die off of snorting a line of cocaine.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not, it's life or death now. So, and
it was a lot cleaner. So the ingredients were cleaner, like the stuff they put in, not just fentanyl, but the stuff they put in certain drugs nowadays to manufacture it and all that is horrific. And so I think it's a whole different time than even when we were growing up versus even when my parents. And I do think though, like I've told Jeff before, you gotta be open and you gotta talk and you gotta not get mad, not let them think, oh, I'm so overprotective. Of course you can be protective, but I'm not saying you gotta be their best friend, but they gotta be able to come to you in situations where it's not a great situation and you don't want to hear what they're about to tell you, but who's gonna, what I've told my kids, because they don't think I know anything. That's normal. And then I'm like, you're the greatest investment of my entire life. Why would I tell you something wrong?
Yeah. Wow.
Why would I give you bad information? If you're my ultimate investment, because you're who I've spent the most money on. So if you're my ultimate investment and I've given up my whole life for you, why would I tell you wrong? So then they won't let me know when they're in it, but I know they're thinking. I know it's right here because they're like, oh, okay. And they'll go away and they'll act like they're not going to listen, but a lot of times they do. I do think what Jeff's doing is what you need to do today. Again, at what point? High school for sure. Because high school they can get anything in high school and even junior high. I do think taking your kids to Al-Anon AA meeting once or twice would be eye opener. At a certain age would be eye opener, because they can listen to all these people that have some pretty gnarly stories.
Yeah,
It
that's a
just, I
good.
mean, that just hit me like a ton of bricks. I saw a big change. You know, we all have some level of success on this call in the real estate world. And I just, you know, my kids are living a life I did not live, right? I mean, they can have anything they want if we were to give it to them, but there's nothing really out of bounds for them. We make things out of bounds for them, but I just started to see some entitlement in them and some like, you know, one time they said, "Oh, we told one of our friends that we're rich, Daddy." I'm like, we are not rich. Daddy's mom is rich. You don't have shit, right? We let
Right.
you use our stuff." So I started to see this entitlement in them, right? And then I took them to volunteer and took them to a homeless shelter, and we served food, and it freaking changed that day. I've never seen it again. And we serve now probably once a quarter,
That's amazing.
once every 6 months. So this is kind of the same thing as that. Like
Yeah.
it's got to be eye-opening, not to be like, hey, look how you could turn out like, but hey, look at the struggle and look how hard these people with this disease, because you're right, Kim, it is a disease. It is cancer. It is any disease you want to call it. Addiction is that. And we need to pray for people that are going through it. We need to, you know, Jeff and I have been saying, hey, everyone gets, you know, Chad strong if Chad were to have cancer, right? But no one gets that when I'm going through treatment, right? In fact, so many people turn their backs on me and instead of leaning in to what I was going through, right? So it's like, gosh, we could put our kids in that situation and show them how hard it is and the disease they could go through if they went down this path. That is amazing and beautiful.
I
And
think
you know,
that's a paint the picture.
I will tell you though, I don't know if it's just who I am as a human, but I don't hold it against my parents. And actually, I just feel like you know, it molded me into who I am today. Maybe good, bad, indifferent, I don't know. But you know, my parents have always, they've more than made it up to me. They've more than, you know, I'm my dad's only biological child, but I have the most dependable parents. I have a stepmom, my dad, and my mom who, you know, I thank God for them. I wouldn't change them for nobody. You know, they're always there for me.
Yeah.
No matter what. You know, I meet people that their parents aren't, and I can't even fathom like not having a support system. My kids have it. Like I wouldn't even have been able to raise my kids without my parents. My parents are a key part and I have 3 amazing young men for children. And my parents played a key part in that. So
and that's everything we've been preaching here is anyone going through addiction, anyone going through a program, anyone having a tough time. There's no way I'm as good a leader, as good a husband, as good a father, as good a Christian, as good as mortgage lender as I am if I didn't go through that rock bottom. Going through my attempted suicide, my cocaine addiction, my treatment, it sucked. It was the worst thing of my life, but it's also been the best thing in my life. And it sounds like that's the 180 your parents have turned around. And it's really taught me how to operate in chaos. There is nothing that rattles me anymore. There's nothing that gets me too high or too low because I've learned and trained myself how to recover from that. And candidly, nothing that could happen to me was as bad as that.
What do they say? You turn your struggle into your rally cry, right? Like, you know, and then you know you had to go through that, but that's what's allowing you to touch and help other people. Same thing with you, Kim. Like you wouldn't be the strong, independent woman that you are today if it wasn't for your parents, if you didn't go through that. So real quick before we wrap up, like how is so your relationship? Did your parents like so they did all the NAA stuff? Like did your pops ever like end up making amends with you? And like how did that kind of like make you feel?
I mean, I don't know if we didn't okay, so my mom and I we've had conversations, lots of them. My dad just comes from a different time period where you just don't talk about a lot of things, and so I think it's harder for him to talk. Oh, but he's more than said that he will forever feel guilt over for my grandmother and me, what he put us through. Like, and I don't want him to feel guilty because like I said, it's a disease. It's not something he said. And my dad, super intelligent, had everything going for himself. He just fell into this. It just, what was once in a while type thing became an everyday thing as addiction happens.
That's how it always starts.
Yeah. So he if he would have never done drugs, my dad would have been on doing something else, but he did. And so I don't necessarily need to have a conversation with him. We've had small conversations, and he's definitely said that he has tremendous guilt over it, but I don't need him to. And I know what he's more than made up. He's more than been, because my dad's been clean since he was 37. So, and my dad's 73. So he's more than made up. My dad built houses. So we lived after age 37, he worked his way up, and we lived a pretty good life. Like, we never needed or wanted for anything. And my mom too, she was always there for me. So I don't have those hangups over what my parents did or what I maybe didn't have. Like I said, that I had some great moments in my childhood, that maybe, I had a sister who's older than me, and we have two totally different childhoods, even though both of our parents, my dad's not her biological father, but he raised her. And he ended up raising a couple of her children after she died. And my sister, it's really crazy to see dynamics of siblings. And my sister went down a different path. And so she was an addict and an alcoholic, and she ended up, and I've never really publicly spoke about this, but she ended up committing suicide a week before my 21st birthday. And so she had mental health issues too on top of it, but she'd been drinking that night. I don't know if drugs were in her system. I don't remember, to be honest with you. It's been a long time, but it'll show you what two paths and she has a totally different accounting for her childhood versus what I have.
Right.
Yeah. And she just couldn't handle it. It was different. And I'm sure she had it a lot worse than I did. She was the oldest, so she'd seen more. She was born in 1969, so she's seen more, and she knew more of what they went through than I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Wow. What a
Thank
story.
you for sharing that.
What a story. I mean, yeah, it just proves that it is, some people say it's how you're born, some people say it's environment, but two people can be brought up in the same environment and have two totally different outcomes. So what I heard today is talk to your kids, be transparent with them, educate them. It is in our schools, it is on the streets. It is not like when we were using. It is different now. It only takes one time and it could end your life. So talk to your kids about that. Jeff, do you have where they can get those test kits? Anyone listening?
Yeah, for sure. It's completely free. You just have to pay for shipping. So what I'll do is I'll put the website URL in the comments. Go take the test. I would urge everybody to take the test. I posted about it yesterday. I just feel like that's a great resource to just have it. It's there.
Say URL
So
again.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's and overdose.net.
Oh, I was just trying to get you to say URL because you're
Oh,
having.
URL. Hey,
Um,
and if anybody's watching this right now and you're thinking about you want to get help, like, listen, there's life after addiction. We find love, we find happiness, we find financial freedom if you want to do the work and make it happen. And we would much rather figure out how to help you and give you some resources than, have to go to your funeral. So if you're watching out there, we love you. We're always available. We want to help.
we want to help and we can point you in the right direction. We've formed some great friends and some great alliances over these 11 weeks that we've been putting this together. I have met some of the most inspirational people, and it just fires me up to continue this on and help other people up that mountain, out of their hole, up the mountain, because that's what mountain climbers do is they look behind them and they help out the next person. And Jeff, and I'm sure Kim and myself are here to do that. I've never been so inspired of hearing some of these stories and hearing people's adversity and what they've overcome to have a great life. And Jeff and I are two knucklehead addicts that should both be dead. And we've had a great recovery. We have a spectacular life, great families, great businesses now, and we're nothing special. If we can do it, you can do it too. You just need to take the steps that him and I have. You need to find help. I've been talking about this for weeks now. You need to find your 4 F's. You need to find the fellowship. That's the program. That's being honest. That's being vulnerable with people, what you're going through. I hid a lot of it, and then I felt like I was attacked because no one was supporting me. Well, it was my freaking fault because I was hiding it from people, right? And I wasn't honest and open, and I was a little embarrassed that I had to go through this and that I had tried to kill myself. So first, you need to find fellowship and people, both a program and friends that you can be open and honest with, right? The second thing for me was fitness. I had to find fitness. I had to get into a routine. I had to do things in the morning that made me feel good instead of me waking up feeling like crap. So that was the second thing. The third thing is I needed my faith. I needed to pray. I needed to get right with Christ, and I did that, and he helped me through that. Actually, I should put that before the fitness. It was the faith, then the fitness, then the fitness. And then I needed to figure out how to have fun again without the drugs. Right. I had to reintroduce those good times. And once I had the tools and the strength to go back out and go to the bars and be around people that might be using, I had to figure out a way to reintroduce that into my life and being strong enough to use. And a lot of that came back to number one was the fellowship and being around people that would help me avoid that and help me with the impulses and the urges to use. So if you guys can take that steps, you're struggling with addiction. This could be gambling addiction. This could be drug addiction. This could be alcoholism. A lot of this is just mental health, right? And you have a work addiction or a pornography addiction. There are all kinds of different addictions. I've been through them. Jeff has been through them. We're here to help. And if we can do it, you can do it too. Any final thoughts, Drago?
No, man, you hit it on the head. Kimberly, thank you so much for coming on. We really love you.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing story, super inspiring. Thank you for the tactics. I'm going to figure out when my kids will go to a meeting with me. And I think that if you take nothing else from today, that is a home run. Educate, put them in a environment where they can learn and let them know what can happen if they go down this path. So thank you for that, Kim.
You're welcome.
All right. You're amazing.
Thank
Drago,
you. You too.
until next week.
Yep.
All right,
We got
brother.
it. We got
Take
it.
care.
Real quick before we go, next week I got my boy Brian Sanfilippo. I went to high school. He lives in Missouri. He actually runs he's a program director for a sober living house out in Missouri. I want him to come on and share what he does best.
Cool.
He's got cool flame tattoos from the early 2000s. So
I like it. You haven't steered us wrong yet. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Kim.
Bye.
Love you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, guys.